name is Chet. I'm the president and CEO of the Sierra Health Foundation. We work throughout California on issues around race and racial equity. And we're here today because we are launching Census Week of Action. We know how important the census is to our communities, particularly the farm worker communities, immigrant communities, communities of color, the LGBTQ community as well. Communities that are often defined as hard to count. And we're saying we're defining these communities as must be counted communities going forward. We also know that these are unusual times and that the COVID-19 pandemic has made the idea of getting out and interacting with people to create a sense of security and safety and to address issues related to their fear about participation has been more important than ever, but also more challenging because we are all social distancing and not congregating in places where we have significant numbers of individuals. But that does not mean the census is any less important than it has always been. In fact, in many, many ways, the pandemic has underscored many of the things we know the census does for communities. And that is provide necessary resources for education systems, for healthcare systems, and so on and so forth. And the pandemic has actually underlined and underscored how systems that we knew were not doing enough for these communities were really, even in some ways, less well positioned than we thought they were to help them and assist them in times of crisis. This is not an opportunity to simply lament about things have been. This is about preparing for the future. This is about Census 2020 and really getting out there and ensuring that hard to count communities and populations are counted, that the distribution of resources would be more fair, and that in the future, should we be so unfortunate to experience some kind of large-scale crisis, that these communities would be best positioned to actually address those things and to do so in ways where their health and safety was not as cautiously and in some ways fragilely experienced as they have been over the past several weeks. We have an all-star lineup of Census 2020 champions who have joined us today. We're very glad to have you all here with us. You're going to talk about some of the creativity of which many of our partners have actually engaged in Census 2020 activities, all virtual, pool parties, comedy skits, things that I think are really incredible. Not only are they committed public servants, but they are some of the most creative people I've actually met as well. They're going to share some of those things with you in person. So without further ado, let me introduce our first speaker, which is Secretary of State Alex Padilla. Secretary Padilla, you actually have the screen.
Well, thank you, Chet. Thank you for pulling us all together here today for this timely message to everybody who's watching. I want to thank all the panelists for their ongoing commitment. Our work for census promotion and assistance doesn't start this morning, didn't start yesterday, didn't start last week. A lot of folks have been at it for well more than a year because you know how important the census is for the reasons you articulated. It means federal funding for our communities for the next 10 years. We also know it means, California's voice in Congress. How many representatives we have in our delegation depends on a fair and accurate count of California's population. So we knew coming into 2020 it was going to be a big year, not just because of the election. People are amped up about the presidential election, but because of the once every 10-year responsibility to participate in the census. So a lot of folks have been gearing up to reach out to our neighbors, hosting the events that you mentioned, whether it's promoting in communities or door to door, and then wham, we're all hit with this pandemic. So you're right, it underscores the significance and the need for census participation. It's required by the U.S. Constitution that every 10 years there should be a national population count. It determines our representation in Congress. It determines federal funding. If there's one thing that people respond to, it's knowing that funding for our communities is at stake, whether it's for public safety, whether it's for infrastructure, whether it's for housing. We know how housing affordability has been a concern in many parts of California, including the San Joaquin Valley. Schools. I tell the story that 10 years ago, the largest undercounted population in California was children under 5. My wife and I have 3 kids. Our youngest is 5 years old, and he's the loudest one in our house. How you can forget about the little ones, I don't understand, but somehow we did. And so for the last 10 years, a lot of those kids were in schools, but the funding that should be there for them was not, right? That tended to be the biggest, most direct example of why the census is important. And like I said, now we're hit with this global health pandemic. So if you care about public health resources for your community, you have to participate in the census. If you care about ensuring that whether it's going to be the testing sites and all the other support that will come with as we're trying to reopen our economy, reopen our society, we're hurting ourselves if we don't participate in the census. And it's actually pretty quick and easy. It doesn't take more than about 10 minutes, but it benefits your community for the next 10 years. Just go online, do it by phone, or by now, if you haven't, you're going to have that paper form in your mailbox, and make sure that every person in your household gets counted. It's about 9 questions, but the most important one is how many people live at this address, and everybody counts, not just the kids. My mother-in-law lives with us. In-laws count if they're living with you. Extended family, if you have any friends that happen to be living with you for the time being. On April 1st, they get counted too. We need to make sure everybody gets counted. I'm going to wrap it up with this before introducing the next speaker here. So nationally right now, we're still lagging a little bit behind where we were 10 years ago at this stage of the census. And so is California. We're just shy of 60% of households in California having responded to the census. California is a little ahead of the national average, which is good, but we're still behind where we were 10 years ago. And with the exception of Stanislaus County, every county in the San Joaquin Valley is lagging even behind the California statewide response rate. So this message is timely. This message is focused and targeted in an area that has historically been harder to count. We've invested a lot of time and energy getting ready for this moment. And now we need everybody on this call to help us spread the word. To do it online, it's easy. Go to mycensus2020.com and follow the prompts. And with that, let me introduce my friend, a former colleague in the legislature, a wonderful representative, State Senator Anna Caballero.
Thank you, Secretary. I'm really happy to join the San Joaquin Valley Census Week of Action. It's a week of action to encourage everybody in the community to fill out their census questionnaire. We really are at a critical moment in our state. Our daily life has changed due to the pandemic, but I know that we can meet any challenge and come out stronger. Part of coming out stronger involves all of us doing our part to ensure that California receives the federal resources that it deserves and that we pay for. We are a donor state. We pay more in federal taxes than we receive, and partly because we have hard to count individuals that don't get counted during the census. This pandemic has highlighted the need for resource allocation to be equitable across the state and in our communities. Unfortunately, California's rural communities in the San Joaquin Valley are at risk of being undercounted in the 2020 census. Some of our most disadvantaged communities, which in my district include Madera, Huron, Planada, Coalinga, San Joaquin, to name a few, had a very low census count in 2010. An accurate count is more challenging now because of COVID-19. The resources we will receive to lift up our children and families and get through this crisis depend on us counting everyone in the community and getting our fair share from the federal government. And we know that our communities desperately need more resources. We need our fair share of federal money to help pay for childcare, physical and mental health, affordable housing, roads, bridges. There are so many resources that come from the federal government that are critically important to our communities. Many of our households have received their census letter inviting them to complete the census via phone or online. And as Secretary Padilla said, it takes a few moments only. So I encourage everyone to tune in, that is tuning in today, to complete the census, and for you to tell families and friends to do so as well. The census information provided is strictly confidential and cannot be shared or used for any other purposes. So one of the challenges that we face is that many of our rural communities use P.O. boxes as a way to receive mail. And because the census does not allow us to mail the census information to a P.O. box, many of you may not have received any information at all about how to get online or to use your phone to take the census. Then that we were depending on the next phase, which is the enumerator phase, for people to go door to door to make sure that people who had used P.O. boxes had the census in their hand. And because of the COVID-19 pandemic, those enumerators have not been out and about. And it's one of the reasons we have some of the lowest numbers in Huron and San Joaquin, 11% and 6.8% between the two of them. We will be having enumerators go out, and they will be an integral part of getting you the census information if you're from one of those rural agricultural communities. And so if they knock on your door, we need you to answer the door and take the census from them and start to fill it out and send it in. So every single one of us has the power to change our community today by standing up and being counted in the 2020 census. I want to thank all of the organizations who have worked so hard on this census to ensure that we have an accurate count. And in particular, I want to recognize the Sierra Health Foundation and the San Joaquin Valley Health Fund. Thank you very much, and let's get to it. Let's make sure we get those census numbers up. Next, I'm really happy to introduce one of my colleagues and a good friend, Assemblymember Dr. Joaquin Arambula.
Thank you, Senator Caballero, and it was great seeing you this weekend when we were in Firebaugh, an area that we both serve together. And while we were there, we were working with many farm workers, helping to do a food distribution and give away PPEs and hand sanitizer that the senator had brought. But it brought firsthand for me personally how much our community lacks and how many resources we need. And coming from the San Joaquin Valley, we oftentimes have a chip on our shoulder that we don't feel that we get enough resources. And I would implore my community that this is our once in a decade responsibility to make sure that we can have access to resources that would support our social safety net, that will support public health and infrastructure and housing and healthcare and programs that each and every one of us really want to support as it helps our most vulnerable. And I do want to speak about the fear that I know that many are experiencing as well, and would just ask us to look towards the love that many of us have for our community and look towards the need that we have for these resources to support our most vulnerable, to help to give you the courage to make sure that we are all counted. And it is with that I am working hard with many of my colleagues who are here today to figure out how we can make sure that everyone does get counted, because these resources are so immediately apparent and in need during this crisis. Now, I want to also thank Chet Hewitt for helping to organize all of us here in the Valley. It's hard to get us all onto the same page, but someone who I have been a big fan of and have been an admirer of is our next speaker. He is the mayor of the great town of Stockton, and I would like to now introduce Mayor Michael D.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction, Dr. Assemblymember, and thank you so much, Chet, Sierra Health Foundation, to the Senator, the CEO, and the legend, Ms. Huerta, for all joining for this important conversation. I'm the mayor of Stockton, California, which is the most diverse city in the nation. And I think particularly looking at COVID-19 is really put into focus the importance of the census, because the communities that are hardest to count in the census are the same communities that are being ravaged by COVID-19. It's the same communities that have been redlined, the same communities with high rates of obesity, diabetes, et cetera, and the same communities who definitely need to be counted so that we have the resources we need to serve our people. I just was reading some data yesterday and found out that my old stomping ground, South Stockton, has less than 50% of folks who are standing up to be counted. And that's troubling because I would argue more than 50% of folks in South Stockton are probably deemed essential workers and are working in the fields or working in manufacturing places or working in logistic plants or working in childcare and putting themselves on the line. So again, the census is incredibly important. Even babies can be counted, so make sure you count your little ones. But it's very, very important to help create the world as it should be post-COVID-19. So again, like the Dr. Assemblymember said, the fear is palpable. The challenges are real. A lot of our hard-to-count communities also don't have access to reliable internet. They're hard to reach, hard to phone. It's going to take trusted messengers to do it, but I am more certain than ever that it has to be done. So I thank you, Sierra Health, for your leadership. I thank you to my colleagues in the legislature for their leadership. I'm looking forward to making sure that we're all are accounted, particularly because we just found out in the last couple months that we're actually all essential and that we're the folks who kind of keep our economy and our country going, even in times of pandemics. So with that, I would like to introduce the president and CEO of the Fresno Center, Mr. Pao Yang.
Thank you, Mayor Tubb. Thank you, Chet, for bringing all of us together. Dr. Joaquin Arambula, champion for the Fresno area, also a real hero for us here at the Fresno Center, the organization that I represent. I want to thank all of you for giving me the opportunity as well to join you and be on this press conference. The census is important to all of us, rich or poor. It doesn't matter where we all come from. You know, it's going to impact us. We can be the richest person and think that it's not going to impact us, but guess what? The roads that we drive our nice, expensive cars, it's impacted. The hospitals, the schools that our kids go to, it's impacted. We need to understand that it doesn't matter if we're a professional or we're well off, it's going to impact us one way or the other. So this is the importance of our census. Each year, $1.5 trillion in federal funds are allocated to state and localities. $1.5 trillion. It is so important that those of us who knows that the census is critical, educate the people that we work with, educate our relatives, our friends, our families. We have a lot of teachers that are right now at home. You have the ability to reach out to your students, to their parents, and talk about the census. It is so critical, more so than ever. 2020. Take a look at the pandemic that we're in, folks. Take a look at the folks that are unemployed. Take a look at the money, the stimulus that are being allocated. The census matters. Personally, civically, politically, boundaries are going to be drawn or redrawn, but we don't count ourselves. It is so critical. I want to share a little bit about the Asian American non-Hispanic population. We're considered one of the fastest growing population here in the US. We saw a 26% growth from 2010 to 2017. We need to be counted. A lot of us think that it don't matter. We're over 330 million Americans. We think that maybe we're too small to be counted. Guess what? We're not. It's going to impact us for the next 10 years. If we don't get counted, we're going to have to live with that for 10 years, folks. Social services program and all the other programs, the funding, like the Senator and the Secretary of State mentioned earlier. With the Fresno Center, the social services program are dear and near to us, especially our mental health programs. If we don't get counted, if there is no census, those fundings will be cut. We won't have the programs to provide services to our community, our immigrant community. Fundings are from the state. They're channeled down to us. Funding are from the federal government to the state, to the county, and then to the city. We're all impacted one way or the other. Here at the Fresno Center, what are we doing to educate our community? We're working with youth leaders. We want our youth to understand the importance of census. We want our youth to be that trusted messenger and communicate with other youth so they can communicate up the chain of command at their household. We're working with community leaders for our Southeast Asian clan leaders within the Hmong community, the Vietnamese, the Lao, the Khmer communities. We're working with different smaller organizations so that we have those trusted messenger who can communicate with their ethnic groups. Staff here at the Fresno Center, we're on ethnic media, radio, TV, doing talk shows and talking about the importance of us being counted. We have ethnic celebrities. We have the comedy that's gonna happen this Friday, and I welcome all of you to invite all of you to join that. We're gonna be probably speaking Monglish, but you can probably understand some of it. If you hear people laughing, laugh. You know, we got the Mayor Libran, to do a special recording just to the Southeast Asian community, because they're so not believing in how important it is to be counted. So we had the mayor do a 30-minute recording addressing the importance of being counted, and for them to be bold, challenge them to count themselves, because it matters. We have distributed over 200 packages during the COVID-19 pandemic. We had to change our scope of work just so that we can reach out to our community in different ways. I had plans of attending those Hmong and luxurious Hmong funerals and events. Dr. Arambula, you've been there many times at the funeral where you have, 2,000 to 3,000 people. We have the Lao New Year that had been canceled, the Khmer New Year that was canceled back in April, where thousands and tens of thousands of people attend. We had to reschedule all of that. We had to redo our outreach, and we had to utilize and relearn or learn, for those of us that are new, how to use the technology, how to educate our community how to use technology. And it's still a challenge. It's still tough. So hopefully a lot of them are on this Zoom chat so that they can see the importance of this. I want to challenge our community to complete the census so that your children and their children lives can be changed to the better. The Fresno Center here, we want to continue to serve you. We want to continue to have the social services program and many of our partners that provide social services here in the Valley. So with that, I want to introduce our next speaker. She probably doesn't need any introduction, but I am honored to introduce, she's an American labor leader and a civil rights activist, founder and president of the Dolores Huerta Foundation, the one, the only, Dolores Huerta.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here with all of you. And this pandemic has really shown the light on some of the places that we need a lot of help. I'm thinking right now of our schools, what our children are going through. We found out there's a lot of places where we don't even have any internet access for many of the kids that are stuck at school. And our Latino community is so needy. Thankfully we have a great governor, Governor Gavin Newsom, that has been able to provide resources to help many of our families in the Central Valley of California and the San Joaquin Valley. And we know that some of those resources are even going to undocumented persons here in our society. What would we do without him? Anyway, but we have to help the governor, because the governor cannot bring those resources into the San Joaquin Valley unless we are counted. Unless we are counted. If not, we're invisible. They don't know that we exist, because as was just said by the previous speaker, that we don't get that money into our community unless we are counted. And we just have to tell all of our folks out there, if you're an immigrant, you're a citizen, if you're undocumented, you count. And the census is confidential. They were not able to put a citizenship question on the census, so you don't have to be afraid. No tengan miedo. You don't have to be afraid. You do not have to disclose your status on the census at all. And it only takes a few minutes to be able to fill the census, and the questions are very, very minimal. But mainly, we want to know everybody that is in the household, and especially we need your name and your birth date. This is the important thing that we need in the census, so that they will know that we are here and that we can be counted. We have seen that Latinos in this pandemic, we are affected 65% times higher than other people. What does that mean? That means that we need the money then for our community clinics, for the healthcare, for people to take care of us when we get sick. But if we don't have the money, that's not going to happen, because the only way that we can bring that money into our community is when we fill out the census. We have so many great needs in our community for our low-income people, for our people of color, and it's really up to us. We really have to take that responsibility, do it for ourselves, do it for our family, do it for our community. Without your help, without your participation, we cannot get that money to come into our community. So we know the census is confidential. Nobody can share the information. No tengan miedo, we have to do this. And I like to say this, si no nos contamos, nos fregamos. If we do not participate in the census, we are really hurting ourselves and hurting our family. So we just want to say to everybody, please, we do the Dolores Huerta Foundation. We were going door to door, then we couldn't do that anymore, but we are phone banking every single day, and we are getting the information out to people when they get their food bank information, when they get those resources. Hey, we're asking them, have you filled out the census? They have to understand that the resources that they are receiving are directly connected with the census. So we just want to say to everybody, we're depending on you. We're depending on you. Please fill out the census. Remember, si no nos contamos, nos fregamos. If we do not participate, if we do not get counted, we are hurting ourselves. Si se puede with the census.
Thank you, Dolores. You have gotten 5 very powerful messages about the importance of participating in the census and how you can help shape the future of your communities. By being counted, you shape the future of your communities. I want to also say that if you want to continue to follow this conversation, looking for the hashtag SJV takes action. That'll give you information on all the local activities that our partners engage in this work. And there are many, many local partners who are out there doing this particular work, walking the streets, knocking on doors, providing assistance during the pandemic, handing out material about the importance of participating in the census for all the reasons that you've heard today. Without that happening, as Dolores says, we will be hurting our own communities if we don't participate. It's how medically underserved communities get money for clinics and hospitals, roads, bridges, broadband, all the things that our communities need to prosper and thrive and to be healthy and successful. So much of it is tied to that census count, including our representation in Congress. We must be our own best advocates and get out there and participate. We're gonna have some questions coming in. They're actually being texted to me, and I'm going to direct them so our panelists can respond. I have our first question, and folks would like to hear from the Secretary of State, the Senator Caballero, or Assemblyman Arambula. What if there is an undercount in California, and how will the state and the legislature actually deal with that undercount? Can we start with you, Secretary Padilla, and then on to you, Senator Caballero?
Sure. So look, the best way to protect ourselves or to mitigate the impacts of an undercount is to try to avoid it, right? That's why we've been working so hard to get the word out. We've been working on outreach initiatives, advertising initiatives. Look, a lot of us that are home a lot, even folks that are working when they get home, they're quick to turn on the news. You see the commercials running, you hear it on the radio, it's all over social media. This is still that prime time window for people to participate in the census. Now, the impacts of an undercount, I think, are a little bit hard to determine because the benefits and the and the tough consequences of an undercount also depend on how other states are doing with their count. So look, I don't pray or cross my fingers that other states are undercounting so that we benefit. The point is to get an accurate picture of our national population and state by state. But the fact of the matter is, to the extent that there is an undercount, it means exactly what we said earlier. It's going to be less funding coming, not just to the state of California, but to each county, each city, each community. All the categories of funding that we've talked about: affordable housing, education, healthcare, so critical in this time. So the good news is there's still time to participate in the census if you haven't, and you have more options than ever before. You can do it on paper. If you haven't done it, you got that paper survey here in the last week or two. But it's easy to do it online. Go to My 2020 Census and begin the process. Or you can even do it by phone. And there's a lot of languages that are accommodated through the phone options. Again, those phone numbers available at My 2020 Census. So don't wait, do it today. And once you do it, tell every friend, tell every neighbor, tell every family member, tell every coworker that they need to do the same.
Am I on? So the difficult thing about this is that the census is statutorily created. It happens every 10 years, and there are rules about how it can be done and when it has to be done by. So it has to end on a certain date, and if you don't get counted, then you lose federal funds. That's what we've been talking about. There's no way to appeal it or to challenge it. Everybody's under the same rules in every state. Right now, because of the pandemic, there is a move to ask Congress to extend it 120 days so that we can get past this, the dire consequence of the COVID inability to walk door to door. If they do that, then that would help us to be able to make sure we're getting everybody counted. But what that does is then it impacts the state, because the state of California uses the census information to determine the lines that are drawn around the legislative seats, so the Senate and the Assembly seats. So we're all looking at this census trying to figure out if we're going to get the count that we need, and that we get it in time, and that we do better than we did the last census. The last census was not good for California. So, and we're behind it right now. So the message, I think, that Secretary Padilla articulated is really true. We need to get everybody involved, and we have to express how important it is that everybody be counted. As Mayor Tubbs said, even the babies, because they count too. And as Dolores Huerta said, undocumented workers also, and undocumented children also get counted, because everybody needs to get counted. So there's no escape from this census. We don't get a do-over or a lot of opportunities to challenge it, but we may get more time, and that's going to be really important.
Yeah, I think the main thing about the census is that people don't realize why they are important. A lot of people feel, well, this doesn't really affect me. They don't really give themselves the self-worth that they should have. And so that's why we have to convince them that you are important, your family's important, and we have to constantly give that message out there and do it over and over and over again until they understand why they need to be counted, why they need to participate, and to kind of remove that barrier of fear that is out there right now, especially for the Latino community, for the immigrant community, and especially the undocumented community.
Can we unmute Dr. Arambula so he could respond?
I'm not sure I had any more poignant insights than have been provided thus far on this question, and I'm happy to turn it back to you, Mr. Moderator.
I have a second question that's come up, and this is for Powell and you, Dolores. It is, how are you getting the census on people's minds given the COVID-19 pandemic? And a follow-up that says, what messages are you using to motivate those that are going through a financial or health crisis at this time about the importance of the census as well? We'll start with both you, Powell, and then move on to Dolores.
Yeah, I think it's you know, the COVID-19 is unprecedented. As bad as it is, it's a good example to our community to let them know that in situations like this, if we're not counted, funding from the federal government, the stimulus, they won't know who's out there. They won't know how to allocate those funding to us. So it's super important. Like I said earlier, it's hard to really utilize technology to these folks, but we are utilizing a lot of the youth. We're trying to utilize a lot of the professionals that are home right now. Like I said, the pandemic is really bad, but for the census, we can utilize the stay-at-home folks who are using telehealth and telecommuting to work right now, utilizing that to also reach out to our community to educate them on the importance of the census. We're being creative. A lot of the tasks that we are working right now to reach our community are tasks that was never on the original plan. But with the COVID, it has challenged us to think outside of the box, to be more creative, and to now more so than ever expressing the importance of being counted, especially our community with multi-generation that are living under one roof, and making sure that everybody is counted. We also have a lot of undocumented, even in Southeast Asian community, folks that are visiting overseas, who are here and they're stuck here. They can't go back. We need to count them. We need to know that they're here so that, you know, appropriate resources are allocated to our community.
With the pandemic to the census, am I muted? Okay. Yeah, we're trying to get people to understand that the resources that they are receiving right now during the pandemic are directly connected to the census, because that's the way that they know that if they're counted, that's how we bring the money into our community. So in our phone banking that we're doing, we're actually asking everyone to please call 5 people that you know. Ask them if they have completed the census and give us a report back to see what they said. So in our phone banking, it's a, you know, again, connecting the resources. We have sent mailings to thousands of people. And in our mailing, we have included a list of all of the places where you can get resources for food, for healthcare, for workers' compensation, unemployment, etc. And then we connected that with the census also. We have actually sent packages out to the labor contractors and the foremen to be able to distribute it with the crews out there that are out there in the field. And then we had a Mother's Day video where mothers all, as they kind of videotape themselves and then send it out to their friends and to other mothers. Again, this is why when you get counted, it helps us, the mothers, to help us with our children. And then our youth group actually has a contest going. We are in 3 counties, Kern, Tulare, and Fresno. We're also doing a lot of work up there in the Antelope Valley. And our youth group has a contest going about, again, asking their friends to contact their friends, to contact their friends, to get that out there and kind of spread up this whole network. I think the one thing about, and I'm going to say about our communities of color, we have a lot of familial relationships. So people in Bakersfield, they have relatives in Parlier, they have relatives in Fresno, and, you know, trying to make this really a family thing about why it's important that we all work together to get counted and to kind of instill into people the responsibility that they have got to take responsibility to make sure that the resources come into our communities. So we're working as hard as we can, and we have to continue the working that we're doing right now. And I think I'm glad that in some ways that it has been extended now, because we had to stop our door-to-door work and do everything virtually. And just recently, and many of you may have heard this, the young man that was killed recently, that came out in the news, and as some of our youth said, well, hey, they did this run that they did, you know, and it actually spread to hundreds of thousands of people that participated in this jogging or running that they did to commemorate the death of this young African-American man that was recently killed by the police. And so this is we kind of have to follow that model and make people really care deeply about why the census is important, and kind of not only add an emotional element to it, but also, as many are doing, like you're doing there in Fresno, do a comedic element also. In the comedic element, and I know that Cindy Quesada, our regional director, she's been saying, hey, we really got to, you know, let's get some comedy into this, because we know that comedy is a really good way to be able to break through that barrier of fear that people have, that they feel intimidated, and that's what's keeping them from participating. So we just have to work a lot harder, and I'm sure that all of us working together and calling in Governor Newsom to continue his great work and have him help us reach out to people, and maybe again, people from the ALRB, let's ask them to come in and reach out to all of the farm workers, because the people that do the farm work, they're a lot of the people that we need to reach right now to make them complete the census. So again, we can do it working together.
Chet, if I may, I think I always get a bit triggered when Dolores speaks, and maybe it is, again, being from the Valley and seeing someone who represents us so well. But she really did touch on a nerve for me, how important it is for us to look towards trusted messengers. This idea of a comadre effect, or how we actually reach out to our gente, is actually being culturally and linguistically competent in ensuring that the message we're delivering is one that's received well. And so I bring this all up to say, I think it's incredibly important who it is that's delivering this important message to our community during these times. And look towards idols like Dolores Huerta, and hopefully our governor is some who can help us to deliver that message, so we can bring people out of the shadows and allow them to participate in this census that will help them to bring resources back to their own communities.
Michael Tubbs, and can you talk a little bit, Mayor Tubbs, about the importance of local jurisdictions, cities and mayors, to add their voice to this particular work, and perhaps provide an example too about some of the things you might be doing in Stockton to actually encourage participation as well.
Absolutely, and I'm sorry I was off camera for a little bit and my buttons unbuttoned. I was trying to facilitate a nap time. But in terms of the question, well, I'll take the latter one first. I'm really lucky in that we have really great community partners that are really kind of taking the lead and just telling me what to do. Like, Mayor Tubbs, record this video. Mayor Tubbs, tweet this. Mayor Tubbs, can you do this? And I say that because I think, particularly given the conversation we've had over the past hour about just the lack of trust and the fear that people have, they really have to hear from credible messengers in our community-based organizations. So I think as mayor, the most prudent thing for me is just being in close contact with my community-based organizations and doing everything I can to facilitate success. So I know my wife and the superstar baby did a video without me, mind you, talking about the importance of being counted for the census and things of that sort, and also just plugging the census every chance we can. And then the first part of the question was just how important local governments are. And again, I think the closer you get to the people, the more trust there is. So I think for a lot of folks in the community, when they hear something from the White House around just all types of craziness, whether it's this COVID-19 or the census or citizenship. And then I think for my office, we've been having a conversation since last year just about kind of why is the census important, and when was the last time someone even tried to put a citizenship question on the census, which is like 1950 something, before Brown v. Board, before for the Reichs, before all of us on this call had a political voice in this country. So we, as a local leader, we've been trying to lift up sort of that history and just reminding people that's not just some dumb paperwork, but all the things you are upset about, from homelessness to lack of funding for clinics, to lack of funding for youth activity, like everything you complain about, the answer is the census. And I try to pivot back to that when appropriate and say, well, look, I know you're upset. That's why I need you to fill out your census and get 5 more to do it. So we'll be better equipped to have the resources that are in line with our population. Because I think our last census count was 290,000 people. Now we're about 320,000 people. And we need the resources to make sure we're able to serve each and every one of them.
For the census who gathered here this morning to help us launch a Census Week of Action. Again, I want to remind everyone who's viewing with us today to go to that hashtag SJV Takes Action, and you'll get to see some of those local activities. You've heard an abundance of reasons why you should take power and claim your communities and support your communities, your family, your neighbors, in filling out the censuses and making sure that there is a complete count. Now, I just want to add to this that there is a dignity that comes along with being counted. Beyond all the financial and other impacts, which we know are critically important, that every individual living in every community needs to be recognized for their human dignity, for the fact that they are actually here, that they are contributing in whatever ways they do to the health and safety and vitality of our communities. And by doing that, you deserve every right to be recognized and counted. And so with that, I want to bring today's press conference to a close. And before I do so, I want to recognize all of our partners, most of whom are not on this call today. But we know there are tens and hundreds of folks that we are working with who are helping to carry this message forward as a good mayor reminds us, who are doing the yeoman's work, who are walking the streets, coming up with the creativity in terms of activities and making sure all those things actually happen. And we definitely want to recognize them as well. And then I see Dolores is signaling me, and when the icon signals you do respond, she will get the last word tonight, this afternoon. Dolores, you have the screen.
Yeah, I just forgot to mention something really important. Many of the groups here in the San Joaquin Valley are doing these drive-by, you know how they do these drive-by birthday parties, and they have the census signs, they're driving around the communities, and they're going out even to the fields where people are working and honking their horns with their census signs and getting out the material about why it's important for people to participate in the census. And so I think that's a really easy thing that people that are watching us can do. Get a few cars and put some big census signs out there and just go around and honk around your neighborhood and make some noise and create some excitement. So just get the message out there to people, hey, the census is, we're still going, we're still alive, we're still working on it, and we need you to help us. Thank you for giving me the additional time. Thank you.
Let's get a complete count. Let's get out there and join in, participate, volunteer, do whatever you can actually do. I want to thank our panelists today. And with that, we will bring our press conference to a close. Thank you all.